The great library of Athenum Prime held the history of 1,000 species. Its halls stretched for miles, filled with glowing crystals that contained the memories of civilizations that had risen and fallen across 50,000 years. The Galactic Concord had built this place to remember everything. But some things they had chosen to forget. Ambassador Kethvoran walked through the oldest section of the archives. His forearms brushed against dusty shelves that no one had touched in centuries. He was looking for something specific, something that had been bothering him for days. The transmission had arrived 3 standard cycles ago. It came from the Dead Reaches, a region of space that the Concord had sealed off 8,000 years ago. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. The final battles of the Scouring had turned those systems into graveyards of broken ships and shattered worlds. Yet someone had sent a message from that darkness. The encryption was ancient. It had taken the best code breakers in the Concord 2 full days to unlock it. When they finally did, they found only 7 words in a language that should have been dead. We remember what you forgot. Kethvoran had not slept since reading those words. He knew that language. Every child in the Concord learned about it in their history lessons, though only as a footnote. A curiosity, a reminder of lesser species that had reached too far and paid the price tag. He found the crystal he was looking for on a shelf covered in dust. The label was faded, but he could still read it. Humanity. Species. Classification. Extinct. Homeworld. Earth. Status. Sterilized. He placed the crystal in a reader and watched the images flicker to life. Humans. They've been such small creatures. Soft bodies. Short lives. Most of them died before reaching 100 years, which was barely childhood for the elder species. They had appeared on the galactic stage 3,000 years before the Scouring, crawling out of their little blue world with primitive ships and too much hope. The Concord had welcomed them, in a way. The elder species always needed soldiers for the dangerous work. Mining operations in unstable systems. Exploration of hostile worlds. And when the Veth Dominion came boiling out of the galactic core, hungry for conquest, the Concord had needed bodies to throw at the enemy lines. Humans had been perfect for that. The crystal showed battle, footage from the Scouring. Kethvoran watched human ships charge into Veth formations. He watched them die by the thousands. They fought with a fury that the elder species found disturbing. They did not retreat when logic demanded it. They did not surrender when defeat was certain. They just kept fighting until nothing was left. The final battle had taken place at a system called Horizon's End. The Veth had pushed the Concord forces back to their last defensive line. Victory seemed impossible. So the Concord admirals had made a decision. They told the human fleets to hold the line. They told them reinforcements were coming. Then the elder species retreated, leaving the humans alone against the full might of the Veth Dominion. It had worked. The humans had fought for 3 days. 3 days of impossible resistance that bought the Concord enough time to regroup and launch a final counterattack. The Veth were defeated. The galaxy was saved. The humans were gone. The Concord had sent ships to find survivors. They found none. Earth had been burned. Every human colony had been destroyed. The species that had saved the galaxy was erased from existence. Or so everyone believed. Kethvoran turned off the crystal and sat in silence. The message from the Dead Reaches played in his mind over and over. We remember what you forgot. He should report this to the High Council. He should tell them that something impossible was happening. But he knew what they would say. They would dismiss it as a trick, a malfunction, a Veth trap designed to lure ships into dangerous space. They would not want to consider the alternative. His communicator buzzed. He answered it and heard the voice of Admiral Thusting, commander of the Concord's border fleet. Ambassador, we have a situation. The Dead Reaches? Yes, I sent a scout ship to investigate the transmission's origin point. They stopped responding 6 hours ago. I sent a patrol to find them. They went silent too. I sent an entire fleet group. 12 ships. They jumped into the system and vanished. Kef Vorn felt cold spread through his body. Vanished? How does an entire fleet vanish? I don't know. But before we lost contact, one of the ships managed to send a partial sensor reading. The Admiral paused. They detected ships. Thousands of them. Coming out of hiding places we didn't know existed. Ambassador, the energy signatures match nothing in our database. But the hull designs, the ship configurations, they look like something from 8,000 years ago. Human ships. That's impossible. The humans are extinct. We confirmed it. We verified it. They're gone. Kef Vorn thought about the dusty crystal in his hand. He thought about the message. He thought about a species that had been abandoned to die, betrayed by allies who saw them as nothing more than useful tools. Admiral, he said slowly, what if we were wrong? What if they survived? Survived? In the dead reaches? Nothing survives there. The radiation alone would kill anything in months. Humans were adaptable. That was in all the reports. They could live in conditions that would kill other species. They were stubborn. They refused to accept limits. Ambassador, you're suggesting that an entire species hid in the most hostile region of known space for 8,000 years without anyone noticing. That's not just unlikely. It's insane. Kef Vorn looked at the crystal one more time. The frozen image showed a human soldier, young and fierce, standing on the bridge of a burning ship. Even in that moment of certain death, the human was smiling. Not with joy, with defiance. Admiral, send no more ships to the dead reaches. Seal the border. And call an emergency session of the High Council. What should I tell them? Kef Vorn stood and began walking toward the exit. His footsteps echoed through the empty halls of forgotten history. Tell them that the ghosts are waking up. Tell them that the species we abandoned, the species we erased from our records and called forgotten echoes, may not be as dead as we thought. And tell them that if I'm right, then everything we built on their sacrifice is about to face a reckoning. He ended the call and stepped out into the light of Athenum Prime's 3 suns. Somewhere out in the darkness between stars, something ancient and angry was moving. And it spoke with human voices. The Concorde had spent 8,000 years forgetting. Now it was time to remember. The station orbited a dying star. Its light was the cold blue of a pulsar, spinning and flashing with the heartbeat of something that should have been dead. Nothing should have lived here. The radiation would cook most species in hours. The gravity shifts would crush their bones. The electromagnetic storms would fry any standard technology. Commander Saravance had been born here. 347 years ago, a mother had given birth in a medical bay while the station shook from another gravity wave. Sira had taken her first breath in a place that the rest of the galaxy considered impossible. That was the human way now. They lived where no one else could. They survived where survival was not supposed to exist. She stood on the observation deck of the remnant flagship, watching the fleet gather. Ships came out of the darkness one by one. They emerged from hiding places inside asteroid fields, from stations buried in the cores of gas giants, from colonies built on worlds with crushing atmospheres and poison air. For 8,000 years, humanity had scattered itself across the most hostile corners of the galaxy. They had become ghosts, shadows, echoes that everyone assumed had faded away. They were wrong. Sira looked at her reflection in the viewport. She barely resembled the humans from the old records. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, adapted to decades of artificial light. Her bones were dense, reinforced by generations of living in high gravity. Her eyes had been modified so many times that they glowed faintly in the dark. She could survive in vacuum for nearly an hour without a suit. She could heal from wounds that would kill her ancestors. 8,000 years of evolution in the harshest environments imaginable had transformed humanity. They were still human, but they were also something more. Something harder. Something that had learned to thrive in the dark. Admiral Chun approached her. He was older than Sarah by almost a century, his hair white and his face lined with scars from battles fought in silence. He had commanded the remnant fleet for 60 years, waiting for this moment. "The council is assembled," he said. "They're waiting for you." Sira nodded and followed him through the corridors of the flagship. The ship was called the Memory of Earth, named for a world that none of them had ever seen. Earth was just a story now, a legend passed down through generations. The blue oceans, the green forests, the sky that changed colors with the seasons. Their ancestors had walked on real ground under a real sun. That life was gone forever, but the memory remained. That was what made them human. They remembered. The council chamber was filled with admirals and commanders from every hidden colony. They represented billions of humans scattered across the galaxy, all of them waiting for the signal to reveal themselves. Some had lived in isolation for so long that their dialects had changed. Some had modified their bodies in ways that made them barely recognizable. But they were all here, united by a heritage of survival and a debt that was 8,000 years overdue. Sira took her place at the head of the table. The holographic display showed a map of the galaxy, with Concord space marked in green and the dead reaches marked in red. Beyond the borders, in the territories that the Concord thought were empty, thousands of tiny blue lights flickered. Each one was a human settlement. Each one was a piece of the empire that everyone had forgotten. "You've all received the intelligence reports," Sira began. "The Veth Dominion has returned. They've been rebuilding in the Outer Rim for centuries, and now they're ready to finish what they started. The Concord is already losing. 47 systems have fallen in 3 months. Their fleets are being destroyed. Their defenses are crumbling." Admiral Yoshida spoke up. "And why should we care? The Concord abandoned us. They used our ancestors as shields and then left them to die. Let the Veth have them." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sira understood the feeling. Every human child grew up hearing the stories. The betrayal at Horizon's End, the burning of Earth, the centuries of hiding and suffering while the Concord built their peaceful empire on human bones. The hatred was justified. But hatred was not enough. "I understand your anger," Sira said. "I share it. But think about what we want. We don't just want survival. We've had that for 8,000 years. We want recognition. We want the galaxy to know what was done to us. We want them to speak the names of our dead." "They'll never do that," another admiral said. "They erased us from their history. They called us footnotes, echoes. They won't admit what they did. They will if we make them." Sira activated a new display. It showed the Concord's capital world, Athenum Prime, surrounded by defensive stations and patrol fleets. "The Concord is desperate. The Veth are coming, and they have nothing that can stop them. They need us. For the first time in 8,000 years, they need what only humans can give them." "And what is that?" Sira smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting her entire life for this moment. "We're going to save them. We're going to fight the Veth and win. And when the battle is over, when the Concord owes its existence to the species it threw away, we're going to stand in their council chamber and demand that they remember every human world that burned, every soldier who died holding a line that their allies had already abandoned, Every child who grew up in the dark because the elder species decided we weren't worth saving. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every commander. They called us forgotten echoes. They were wrong. Echoes fade. We didn't fade. We grew stronger. We became something they never imagined. And now we're going to show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Chun stood and placed his fist over his heart, the old salute from before the scouring. For Earth, he said, one by one. Every commander in the room rose. The words spread like fire through the fleet, transmitted to every hidden colony across the galaxy. For Earth. The remnant fleet began to move. Thousands of ships that shouldn't exist, crewed by a species that should have been extinct, emerged from the darkness and turned toward Concord space. They came not as conquerors seeking revenge. They came as ghosts demanding to be seen. The galaxy had spent 8,000 years forgetting humanity. That was about to change. Sarah Vance stood on the bridge of the memory of Earth and watched the stars blur as the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. Behind her, the hidden empire was waking up. Ahead of her, a reckoning was waiting. The echoes were coming home. The Grand Chamber of Species had not seen this much fear in 8,000 years. Representatives from all 12 elder races sat in their assigned sections, their faces showing various shades of panic and disbelief. The holographic displays around the room showed the same terrible images over and over. Veth warships burning through Concord defenses. Colonies being consumed. Refugees fleeing in ships that would never be fast enough. Ambassador Keth Vorn sat in the Scylla section and watched his colleagues argue. They had been arguing for 3 days now, and they were no closer to a solution. The Veth were too strong. The Concord fleets were too weak. Every strategy they proposed ended the same way. Defeat and extinction. Then the alarms started screaming. A ship had appeared in orbit above Athenum Prime. It had not come through any of the normal approach routes. It had simply materialized, as if it had jumped from somewhere impossible using technology that should not exist. The defensive platforms locked weapons onto it immediately. Unidentified vessel, state your origin and purpose. The Planetary Defense Commander broadcast. You have entered restricted space. Respond or be destroyed. The response came in a language that made Keth Vorn's blood turn cold. It was the same language as the message from the dead reaches. The same language that had been listed as dead for 8 millennia. We are the remnant fleet of humanity. We request permission to address the Grand Chamber. We have come to discuss the survival of your civilization. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded that the ship be destroyed immediately. Others argued that this was clearly a trick, a Veth deception designed to infiltrate their defenses. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they were hearing. Keth Vorn stood up. His voice cut through the noise. Let them land. The High Chancellor, a massive Corvian with scales the color of dried blood, turned to face him. Ambassador, you cannot be serious. The humans are extinct. This is clearly a trap. If it is a trap, destroying one ship will not save us. The Veth are already winning. But if it is not a trap, if the humans have truly survived, then we are looking at the only chance we have. The only chance. These were primitives. Short-lived creatures we used as soldiers because they were expendable. Even if some survived, what could they possibly offer us? They could offer us the one thing we have lost, Keth Vorn said. Hope. The debate continued, but in the end, fear won. The Concord was losing the war. They had no options left. The human ship was allowed to land. Commander Sarah Vance walked into the Grand Chamber of Species 30 minutes later. She was not alone. A squad of human soldiers accompanied her, their armor unlike anything the Concorde had ever seen. It seemed to absorb light, making them look like shadows that had learned to walk. Sira herself wore a simple uniform, gray and unadorned. She needed no symbols of rank. The way she moved, the way she carried herself, spoke of absolute authority. She stopped in the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. "You look frightened," she said. "Good, you should be." The High Chancellor rose from his seat. "You will show respect to this council, human. You are guests here." "Guests?" Sira laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Is that what you call the species you abandoned to die? The species you used as shields while you retreated to safety? The species whose worlds you let burn while you erased them from your history books? That was 8,000 years ago. Those decisions were made by our ancestors, not by us. And yet, you still benefit from them. Your peaceful civilization, your prosperous worlds, your comfortable lives, all of it was built on the graves of my people. Every day that you exist is a day paid for with human blood." Silence fell over the chamber. Keth Vorn watched the human commander with growing fascination. She was not asking for their help. She was not begging for mercy. She stood in the heart of enemy territory, surrounded by species that had betrayed her ancestors, and she showed no fear at all. "What do you want?" the Chancellor asked finally. "The Veth are coming for you. Your fleets cannot stop them. Your defenses will fall. In 6 months, maybe less, this chamber will be a graveyard. But I am offering you a chance to survive. At what price?" Sira stepped forward. "Acknowledgement. Nothing more. You will publicly admit what was done to humanity. You will speak the names of every human world that was destroyed. You will tell the galaxy the truth about the Scouring, about Horizon's End, about how the elder species saved themselves by sacrificing us. That's impossible. The political consequences alone would destabilize the entire Concorde, then die." Sira shrugged. "The Veth will not care about your politics. They will burn your worlds and erase your species, just as you tried to erase mine. At least you will die with your precious dignity intact." Before anyone could respond, a communication alert flashed across every display in the chamber. "Emergency transmission. Priority 1. This is Korvath Station. We are under attack. Veth fleet has jumped into the system. We have 12 million civilians. No defensive forces available. Requesting immediate assistance. Please, someone, anyone, help us." The transmission cut off. The chamber fell silent. Korvath Station was the Concorde's largest civilian shipyard. 12 million people, families, children, and the nearest Concorde fleet was 6 hours away at maximum speed. Sira looked at the Chancellor. "Your choice is made for you. My fleet is the only one close enough to respond. We can be there in 40 minutes. Why would you help them? After everything we've done?" Sira paused. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something that looked almost like pain. Because they're innocent. Because most of them were not even alive when your ancestors betrayed mine. Because humans don't abandon people to die, even people who might deserve it. She turned toward the exit. "That's the difference between us and you. We remember what we are." She stopped at the door and looked back. "When this is over, we will have our acknowledgement. The galaxy will know the truth. But right now, there are 12 million people who need to be saved. And whatever we think of each other, saving people is what humans do." She walked out. Her soldiers followed. 30 seconds later, her ship was climbing back into orbit. Keth Vorn watched her go and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt shame. The humans were going to save the people who had destroyed them. And all the Concorde could do was watch. Korvath Station hung in the darkness like a wounded animal surrounded by wolves. The Veth fleet had arrived with overwhelming force. 200 warships against a civilian installation with no military defenses. The evacuation had begun immediately, but there was not enough time. There was never enough time. Commander Sarah Vance stood on the bridge of the Memory of Earth as her ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The sensor displays filled with red contacts. Veth vessels swarmed around the station, their weapons already firing. Sections of the station were venting atmosphere. Escape pods launched in desperate clusters, trying to reach safety. All ships, this is Vance. Standard engagement pattern. Protect those civilians at all costs. The remnant fleet spread out around her. 167 ships against 200. Bad odds by any normal standard. But humans had stopped thinking in normal standards a long time ago. A Concorde observation ship hovered at the edge of the battle, its crew watching and recording everything. Admiral Thiessen had sent it to document what happened. He wanted to see how humans fought. He was about to get an education. The first wave of human ships hit the Veth formation like a hammer. They did not hold back. They did not maneuver for advantage. They simply attacked with everything they had. Weapons that the Concorde had never seen tore through Veth shields. Human pilots flew patterns that should have been impossible, pushing their ships beyond any safe limit. The Veth responded with brutal efficiency. Human ships began to die. 1, 3, 7. The numbers climbed steadily. But for every human ship that fell, 2 or 3 Veth vessels went with it. And the humans did not stop coming. On the observation ship, Admiral Thiessen watched in growing disbelief. "This is insane," he whispered. "They're taking losses that would break any fleet. Why aren't they retreating?" His aide, a young Silith officer named Keftal, shook his head. "They don't retreat, sir. I've been studying their tactics. They never retreat. Every species retreats when the odds turn against them. It's basic survival instinct. Not humans. They just keep fighting. Even when they're losing. Even when death is certain. They keep fighting until there's nothing left." A human cruiser, badly damaged and trailing fire, turned directly toward a Veth carrier 10 times its size. Instead of trying to escape, it accelerated. The carrier's weapons hammered it, stripping away armor and destroying systems. Still it came. In the final seconds, the human crew ejected their reactor core and detonated it manually. The explosion took both ships. Thiessen felt sick. Why would they do that? They could have escaped. They could have lived, because the carrier was heading toward the evacuation corridor. If it reached the escape pods, thousands of civilians would have died. The human crew made a choice. On the main battle line, things were getting worse. The Veth had realized they were facing something unexpected, and they were adapting. More ships poured in from reserve positions. The human fleet was being surrounded. Sarah Vance coordinated the battle from her command chair, her voice calm despite the chaos. She had lost 30 ships already. She would lose many more before this was over. But the evacuation was succeeding. Transports full of civilians were escaping through gaps her fleet had created in the Veth lines. Her communications officer turned to face her. "Commander, we have a problem. The Veth flagship is moving to block the primary evacuation route. If they reach that position, they can destroy the transports at range. How long until they're in position?" 12 minutes. And our closest ships? Too far. And too damaged. None of them can intercept in time. Sierra looked at the tactical display. The math was simple and terrible. The Veth flagship would reach its position. The transports would be destroyed. Millions would die, unless someone stopped it. Signal the fleet. Tell them to continue protecting the evacuation. "I'm going after the flagship myself." "Commander, that's suicide." Their flagship is the most heavily armed vessel in the battle. I know. She stood up. But those are civilians, children, families. They didn't betray us. They didn't abandon us. They're just people trying to survive. And I will not let them die, because the odds are bad. The memory of Earth broke from the main battle line and accelerated toward the Veth. Flagship, alone, one ship against a monster. Admiral. Thiessen watched it happen and finally understood something about humans that no report had ever captured. They did not fight because they thought they could win. They fought because fighting was the right thing to do. Victory and defeat were secondary to something deeper, something that the elder species had never truly understood. Humans fought because they believed some things were worth dying for. The memory of Earth reached the Veth flagship and began its attack run. Weapons fire filled the space between them. The human ship took hit after hit, its shields failing, its armor burning away. But it kept coming, always forward, never stopping. Then something impossible happened. New contacts appeared on every sensor screen. Ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel by the hundreds. They came from every direction, emerging from hidden approach routes that no one had known existed. Human ships. Wave after wave of them. Sarah's voice crackled across all channels. This is Commander Vance to all remnant forces. The call has been answered. Show them what we are. They had come from every hidden colony in the galaxy. Ships that had been waiting in silence for 8,000 years, finally answering the summons. The second wave of the human fleet crashed into the Veth, formation like a tide of fire. The battle turned. What had been a desperate defense became a massacre. The Veth, caught between two human forces, tried to retreat. But humans did not let their enemies escape. They pressed forward with relentless fury, turning the Veth fleet into burning wreckage. In the end, not a single Veth ship survived. The memory of Earth drifted in space, broken and burning. Its crew was gone, killed in the assault on the flagship. Only Syrah remained, and barely. Her body was destroyed, but her mind had been transferred to the ship's computer in the final moments. It was an old human trick, learned from centuries of dying in places where rescue was impossible. Sometimes survival meant becoming something new. Admiral Thiessen's observation ship approached the human wreckage. Medical teams stood ready, though they had no idea what they could do to help. A young human soldier, missing an arm and covered in burns, was pulled from an escape pod. Kethol knelt beside him as the medical team worked. Why? The Silith asked. Why did you save us? After everything our people did to yours? The human looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. And then, impossibly, he smiled. Because you forgot us. But we never forgot ourselves. We never forgot what humans are supposed to be. He coughed blood. We don't abandon people. Not even people who might deserve it. That's what makes us human. That's what they couldn't kill, no matter how hard they tried. The soldier closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. But he was still smiling. Kethtal stood and looked at the burning remnants of the battle. 12 million civilians had been saved. The Veth fleet had been destroyed. And humanity had announced its return to the galaxy in a way that no one would ever forget. The echoes had become thunder. And the thunder was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Korvath Station. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Human officers now served on Concord ships. Concord engineers studied human technology with amazement and fear. Two civilizations that had been enemies for 8,000 years were learning to fight together. They had no choice. The true Veth invasion was coming. The threshold was a gateway at the edge of known space, a place where the barriers between dimensions were thin enough to tear open. The Veth had used it once before during the Scouring. Now they were preparing to use it again. Intelligence reports showed their fleet massing on the other side. Thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands. More than anything the combined forces of humanity and the Concord could hope to defeat in open battle, but the threshold could be destroyed. A singularity bomb, detonated at its heart, would collapse the gateway forever. The Veth would be sealed away. Their invasion ended before it could begin. The problem was getting the bomb there. The planning room on Athenum Prime was filled with admirals from both species. Holographic displays showed the threshold and the Veth forces guarding it. The math was simple and brutal. Any ship trying to reach the gateway would have to fight through an armada. The odds of survival were essentially zero. "We cannot ask any crew to take this mission," the Concord High Chancellor said. "It is certain death. There must be another way." Commander Sarah Vance's voice came from the speakers in the ceiling. Her consciousness now lived in the computer networks of the remnant fleet, distributed across 100 ship cores. She had given up her body to survive the Battle of Korvath, but her mind remained as sharp and determined as ever. There is no other way. Someone has to carry the bomb through that armada. And you're right that you cannot ask anyone to do it. A pause. That's why we're not asking. The remnant fleet volunteers. The chamber fell silent. Human and Concord officers looked at each other with expressions of shock and something that might have been shame. Admiral Thiessen stood. "Commander, we cannot allow this. Your people have already sacrificed so much. The Battle of Korvath, the defense of the outer colonies, the fighting at Marketh Prime. Humanity has given enough. With respect, Admiral, that's not your decision to make. My people have discussed this. We voted. The answer was unanimous. But why? You could stay back. Let the Concord forces make the attempt. After everything we did to your ancestors, why would you throw away more human lives to save us?" The speakers were quiet for a moment. When Sierra spoke again, her voice was soft. "Because this is who we are. You spent 8,000 years calling us ghosts, echoes, footnotes in your history books. But you never understood what made us human. It wasn't our bodies. It wasn't our technology. It was something deeper. Something you couldn't kill no matter how hard you tried. And what is that? We believe that some things are worth dying for. Protecting the innocent. Fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. Standing against the darkness, even when the darkness is certain to win. That's what makes us human. That's what kept us alive in the dead reaches for 8,000 years. And that's what we're going to prove at the threshold." Ambassador Kathvoran stood slowly. His eyes were wet. "Commander Vance, before you go, there is something this council must do. Something that should have been done a long time ago." He turned to face the assembled representatives. Human and Concord alike. "We have been preparing a document. A formal acknowledgement of what the Concord did to humanity during the scouring. The betrayal at Horizon's End. The abandonment of human forces. The destruction of Earth and all human colonies. The deliberate erasure of humanity from our historical records." His voice broke slightly. "It will be broadcast to every world in the galaxy. The truth will finally be told." Sierra was silent for a long moment. "That was all we ever wanted. To be remembered. To have our dead spoken of with honor instead of forgotten like they never existed. They will be remembered. I swear it." The fleet assembled at the edge of the threshold system 1 week later. 500 human ships, the largest concentration of remnant forces ever gathered. They faced an armada that darkened the stars. Sarah's consciousness was distributed across the entire fleet now. She could feel every ship, every crew member, every beating heart. These were her people, her family, and she was going to lead them into the fire one last time. "All ships, this is Commander Vance. You know why we're here. You know what we're facing. The odds are against us. Most of us will not survive." She paused, letting the words settle. But our ancestors faced worse odds at Horizon's End. They held the line when the Concorde abandoned them. They fought until there was nothing left. And because of their sacrifice, the galaxy survived. Now it's our turn. Now we show the universe what humanity truly is. The fleet began to move. Human ships surged forward into the Veth formation. The battle was immediate and brutal. Explosions filled the void. Ships died by the dozens. But the humans did not stop. They could not stop. They pressed forward through walls of fire, trading their lives for every inch of progress. The Concorde fleet watched from a distance, guarding the escape route. Ambassador Keth Voran stood on the bridge of his diplomatic vessel, tears streaming down his face as he watched humanity die for a galaxy that had tried to erase them. "Record everything," he whispered. "Let no one forget this. Let no one ever forget." The remnant fleet pushed deeper and deeper into the Veth Armada. Half their ships were gone. Then, 2/3. The survivors kept fighting. They rammed Veth vessels. They detonated their reactors to clear paths. They died with their hands on the controls, fighting until the very last second. Sarah's flagship, the last ship carrying the Singularity Bomb, reached the heart of the threshold. She was alone now. Her crew was gone. Her fleet was destroyed. Only her consciousness remained, held together by damaged systems and failing power. The Veth flagship blocked her path. The largest vessel in their armada, bristling with weapons, determined to stop her, Sarah smiled. Or rather, she felt what a smile would have felt like if she still had a face. "You call this Forgotten Echoes," she broadcast on all frequencies. Both fleets could hear her. Both species. The whole galaxy, listening in stunned silence. "You were wrong. We are what remains when everything else is taken. We are the voice that speaks from the darkness. We are the fire that would not die." A ship accelerated toward the Veth flagship and the threshold beyond it. "We are humanity, and we do not go quietly." The Singularity Bomb detonated. The threshold collapsed. Reality twisted and screamed as the gateway folded in on itself. The Veth Armada was caught in the destruction, crushed by forces beyond comprehension. In seconds, it was over. The invasion was ended. The galaxy was saved, and Sarah Vance was gone. 1 year later, on a restored Earth, the planet was green again. Human terraformers had worked for centuries in secret, healing the wounds that the scouring had inflicted. Now, for the first time in 8,000 years, people walked on real ground under a real sun. A monument stood at the site of the last human city, carved from black stone that would last for millennia. It bore the names of every human who had died in the scouring and every human who had died saving the galaxy. Millions of names. A testament to sacrifice. Delegations from every Concorde species gathered there annually now. They came to speak the words that their ancestors had refused to say. Ambassador Keth Voran, old now but still alive, stood before the monument and read the acknowledgement that had been broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. "We remember the humans who died at Horizon's End. We remember the humans who survived in the darkness. We remember Commander Sarah Vance and the Remnant Fleet. We remember, and we will always remember." Above him, the sky was blue. The clouds drifted peacefully, and far above the clouds, visible only as points of light, the new human fleet kept watch, because humans had learned something in their long exile that the Concorde had never understood. Echoes don't fade. They wait, and when the time comes, they answer.